This episode of Recovery is Possible is brought to you by Retreat Behavioral Health, where there are endless possibilities for recovery. Retreat provides quality care at their leading mental health and substance use treatment centers, which are designed to offer patients truly personalized and comprehensive programs that are tailored to their needs. Retreat Substance Use and Mental Health Treatment Centers in Palm Beach County, Florida, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and New Haven, Connecticut do everything in their power to ensure that patients receive the highest quality treatment in a safe and comfortable setting. So reach out today at retreatbehavioralhealth.com or call at 855-802-6600 for more information. Hey there, this is Mike Van Meter, and this is Recovery is Possible. Thanks for joining me today. And I want to just share with you again an interview that I did with our Aparna Sain on WERA 96.7 in Arlington, Virginia. And we did this interview last week. And in this particular episode, I was a guest on her show. And we are talking about the importance of relationships in both a spiritual journey and in recovery. And really, recovery at the end of the day is a spiritual journey. And she and I talk about this topic and talk about how important it is to be in relationships with other people. After all, addiction is isolation, and recovery is community, and we have community by having relationships with other people. So I want you to join us on this interview, and I know that you're going to get a lot out of it. And please share this interview with as many people as you can that need to be in recovery, or they are around someone or related to someone that needs to be in recovery. So check this out. Again, this was an interview I did with Aparna Sain, and she's also the host on her own show, WERA, and it's called Mindful Nation. So here's the interview.
Welcome to Mindful Nation Radio. I'm your host, Aparna, and we're delighted to have another live show here for you. So today's show, I'm excited. We've got a lot of good stuff here. I have got my good friend Mike Van Meter joining us. Mike is the host and producer of Recovery is Possible, and his show usually comes on after mine. And today we are going to do a swap. He's going to be a guest on my show, and I'm going to be a guest on his show, and we are going to explore different topics that come together on mindfulness, recovery, and all things that make us better as a whole. So relax, get comfortable, because we are going to jump right into some of these topics. And I thought it would be nice to share something that is actually very important in my own personal journey, which is relationships. A lot of people think when we're on the spiritual path, it's an individual's journey, which it really is. But it's also how we connect with others around us. So on the spiritual path, we say that the things that we encounter on the path and in our lives are things we need to grow and to evolve. So people always say, how come I didn't get what I wanted or asked for? Well, you may or may not get what you want, but you will always get what you need. So to evolve, to grow to the next phase. So with that, we're going to explore the topic today. And I want to welcome Mike. Mike, how are you doing?
Hi, Aparna. How are you? Thanks again for having me on your show.
Yeah, so I'm delighted that you are able to join me live. So we are broadcasting live out of Arlington Independent Media, WERA LP Arlington 96.7 FM. And Mike is the host, as I mentioned, of Recovery is Possible. So Mike, I wanted to get your take. I know recovery also is a very individual journey, but I wanted to get your take on how people deal with relationships when you are deep into that recovery process. It's a lot of transition and transformation we go through as individuals. how does that relate to people? Some people don't want us, people around us don't want to see us change. It's very hard for them to see you transforming as an individual. And sometimes I notice in my personal journey when I go back to meeting people before I jumped into the spiritual path. So I am not in recovery, and never have been, but I have always been very knee deep in the spiritual path over the last 5-6 years. And I notice when I go back and meet the people that knew me before, I tend to go back to the person I used to be. And I struggle with that because now I've gone through a lot of transformation and I want to stay in that space of being whole and healthy and kind of a different person than I used to be when I was in that previous state of being. So, Mike, do you have any thoughts?
Oh, wow. There's so much to cover. How long's your show again? We might have to go on for a long time.
Exactly.
With this.
This is a very big topic.
It is. And, as I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking about this, there's just so many, a flood of emotions and thoughts that come across. And let's just kind of backtrack a little bit here. And I'm going to start with the last thing you said, and that is that because I want to go into the way that it is once you get into recovery and going back to those old relationships, and then going back and talking about the relationships to begin with when you come into recovery. Because we've talked about this before, that addiction is isolation, recovery is community, right? So in your addiction, you're isolated. In your recovery, you get into community. But let's just start at the end, and that is, let's say you're in recovery and you're sort of on that path. You're on that journey. You've got your program of recovery going. You feel balanced. You feel well. But it's easy to do when you're surrounding yourself with recovery people. You're going to recovery meetings. You maybe your family has rebalanced itself, and you've got your community. And which is also true when you're in a treatment center. In a treatment center, it's easy to stay sober when you're just surrounded by that. There's no access to drugs or alcohol, number one. But then your whole life revolves around being in recovery. Kind of like when you went to the Himalayas and you're doing that spiritual retreat. You're immersed in that, right?
Yeah.
And in a recovery center, you're immersed in it. But the problem is, what happens when you walk out that door?
Exactly.
Or when you come out of the Himalayas, then you got to go back. And then, so what happens is you're on that path. But remember, addiction is not just about that person in recovery. It affects the family unit. It affects everybody around you. And for many people, what led to the addiction in the first place is like dysfunctional family units, dysfunctional life, dysfunctional work balance, and all those types of things. So let's say you're in recovery. And then let's say you then have to go back, it's Christmas time or the holidays, and you have to go and visit that extended family. And immediately it hits you when you get home that, oh my goodness, I'm back into that environment that created the problems in the first place. Exactly. And it can really, if your program's not strong, that can really, really throw you off your game. And so that has such a negative impact because there's so much baggage there. So much baggage there. And so the key is going to be in recovery is how to be able to get into your program of recovery and then maintain that no matter what the other influences are. That's the key.
And, it's interesting you bring up the isolation component because most spiritual people who go deeper and deeper into their spiritual journey, we tend to isolate. I personally did that, and COVID made it very easy for me to isolate. So for many years, actually, for 5-6 years, isolation seemed to be the best solution, right? To kind of hide out because I want to maintain the state that I've been able to achieve through that very deep meditation journey. So isolation but isolation over long haul can be very toxic. Community is what we want to...
Well, you're not designed to be isolated.
Exactly. Yeah, humans are not designed for isolation. Mm-hmm. We are here for connection, we're here for community, and we're here to serve.
Right.
So you can't serve in isolation.
Because you imagine, it's great. I think we all need to isolate in order to do the things that you talk about, to meditate, because we have to recenter ourselves. Mm-hmm. But imagine if in the world, everybody was isolated and we never communicated with one another. that wouldn't be a very fun world to be in. So we have to find that balance of being isolated. But I don't like to look at that as isolation. I look at that as like reconnection to you, your inner self,
the healing,
the healing and the spirituality part of it.
I
but
agree.
At the end of the day, you're designed to communicate with other people because, after all, in recovery, step 12, for those that are 12-step people, step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening through these steps. Then we carry the message to those that continue to suffer. So the connotation there is that through a spiritual awakening, you're connecting with others and helping them. So your goal then at that point is to help other people, and you can't do that if you're isolated.
Right, and sometimes the reason it becomes easy to isolate, I mean, we practiced this, right? In 2020, when we had COVID happen, we all were forced into isolation in a lot of ways, right? So for someone like me who lived on my own, it was isolation. You were by yourself. So we learned and we saw what were some of the negative impacts associated with that. We saw some of the positive impacts. I was able to go deeper into my spiritual journey. So those are some of the positives. But in order to serve, as you just mentioned, you have to be able to reintegrate into that community while maintaining that state that you are able to achieve of being whole and healthy as an individual. So you want to maintain your authenticity and individuality while being in community and serving. And it's a dance, you know, especially I notice a big difference in the masculine and feminine relationships, right? So typically we're all masculine, it seems like, in the relationships, especially in corporate relationships, because that's how women are asked to show up, right? We're all driven to success, goal-oriented. What are my things I'm going to achieve? Where's my to-do list? What have I checked off? But those are all masculine qualities. So when you're a woman and you want to attract a man, all of a sudden you just kind of keep, because they're two masculine heads talking to each other, there's no feminine to come in and kind of attract and hold on to that kind of a connection. So that's one reason why I'm bringing this up, because I am actually going to be talking a lot more about this whole how to be feminine and embark on that feminine energy and share that in a corporate environment.
That's pretty interesting. But, you know, and when you were talking about COVID, it is interesting that you mentioned that it was good for you, because there are some people that talked about, like, for example, and I think we mentioned, you and I talked about this last week, that on average in the United States, I read in this article that said that on average the people gained 30 pounds.
Yes.
In the United States. And so when I go and I talk to people and they say, man, COVID was horrible because, you know, my workout cycle was off, my diet was off. And but there were some people who said, no, absolutely, I was able to get more working out in. I was able to take better care of myself. It depends on the person. So if you're somebody like yourself or me, I actually think I dove deeper into my recovery. And while it helped that while COVID happened, I went back to school and got a degree in addictions counseling. So I immersed myself in that, but that's not what everybody does. You know, that's because you and I, at least in this realm, are fairly centered in what we're doing. But if you're someone that's still struggling with, in my case, in the world that I'm in, addiction, if you don't have that centered, if you don't have that spirituality, if you didn't have that mission, so to speak, during that period of time, COVID was disastrous. The suicide rate skyrocketed. The relapse rate or the developing the addiction rate was horrendous. We're seeing the effects of that now where I work. And that's going to be the key because, you know, you have to get into a deep sense of wellness and recovery, not for the good times, because again, it's easy to stay sober. It's easy to stay centered and spiritual when things are going well, but we're preparing for when things are not going well. That's the problem. And, you know, and I think I shared with you a story about a friend of mine that just relapsed recently and had about 9 years of sobriety and then ended up relapsing, got a DUI, and actually just cost him his job, as a matter of fact, unfortunately, created a lot of pain. But what had happened there was just, you know, this individual was able to maintain that sobriety through that period when he was surrounded by people, again, relationships, right, surrounded by that recovery community. Then COVID hit, and the government, of all things, prevented us from meeting together. Just imagine that for a minute. That's a whole other topic for another day. Now you're not allowed to be around one another but yet not being able to keep that focus and keep that sense of community, and then it led to some very disastrous things. So that's going to be the thing. We're preparing. It's kind of like an athlete. You practice and practice and practice and practice, but you're doing that for game day. And game day for us is when things go bad, when the world goes bad, because we never know what's going to happen. But are you going to be ready on that day?
You're tested, as we say, on the spiritual path.
And how well did you prepare for that?
Yes, and preparation is a large part of that. And you never know till you know. So that's why on the spiritual path, we say that this is all a practice, because there will be some days when you're tested and you may fail. Right, but when how quickly can you come back?
Yeah, resiliency. That's the resiliency part of it.
Piece. Yeah. So that is we're tested all the time, but how quickly can we come back?
Right.
So that is something that is just done over practice. So not judging ourselves, coming back to the practice, going back to the 12 steps, or going back to whatever it is that centers you. And, and meditation is a great tool for that. So that's why we say it's a daily practice, right? So meditation and mindfulness, those are daily practices that we need to observe regardless of what's happening. So when you're happy, you're meditating. When you're sad, you're meditating. You're meditating daily for 15 minutes at least every day.
Right.
No matter what happens, because that's your practice.
Yeah, and just one other thought on that too, is that there's just something inherent in us that we think that, like, if we find religion, let's say, or we find mindfulness and meditation, or we get into recovery, there's this idea that once that happens, life is going to get good and people around us will get good. And I think that, again, looking at relationships, that's something that we have to get out of our mind, that the world doesn't change around us. People don't all of a sudden become good because we got well, right? Because we found religion, because we found spirituality, we found recovery. That's not how it works. And in fact, oftentimes it seems as though things get worse. And in the recovery world, the reason why it seems that way is because now we're aware of it. See, if you're high all the time, or if you're drunk all the time, you've numbed out. You don't feel all the things that are around you, but when you're sober, you feel it. So it's worse. And what we tell people in recovery is you got to remember those jerks that are out there, the bad things that are going to happen. They're there. They're not going away. They haven't changed. The world hasn't changed. You have changed. And that's really what it comes down to, is we aren't getting sober to change the world. We're getting sober so we can change how we react to the world. And that's an important distinction.
I love that. And it's a very important distinction, exactly, because one of the things that I want to get away from is people always say, oh, now I've evolved, and so now I need a new set of friends because those old friends I can't relate to them, or something else happens when I talk. Those people are bad, and I'm going to find good people. Well, this is one of the biggest mistakes. There's no good, there's no bad. People, and it may be true that, if you're surrounded by someone who's always drinking, then you want to get away from that for a little bit. But the reality is that we don't pick our family. So, you definitely have those relationships that are still there, but it's how you deal with them, or how you are and how you process those emotions. And one of the things I love about a spiritual practice is that over time, and this happens very subtly over time once you start meditating or doing some of the breath work, is you start to create a little space between you and that trigger. So when I first started experiencing it, it was kind of nice, because all of a sudden now you're becoming an observer of that act. So it's not really triggering you. You're observing it. It may bother you for a few minutes. It's almost like it's taking you away. You're rising above it. And then you're able to kind of assess it in a more holistic, like in a better way. So you're more objective is the word I'm looking for. So it's a really good tool to have, because you're able to kind of step away. That's why we say, if you're triggered, take a few deep breaths and then come back and respond, because the response is going to be totally different. Two triggered people are just talking at each other. Not really. Nobody's not getting anywhere.
It's interesting that you bring that up because when you look at the 12 steps 4 and 5, 4 is where you do a searching and moral inventory of yourself, and you list out all of the things that, the way that you would put it, trigger you. We kind of discuss this in different terms, but it's really looking at the things that sort of set you off, trigger you, if you will. And then step 5 is you share those things with another person, and then you discuss why that is. But what we want to do in recovery is those triggers is we want to go back and we want to explore why does that trigger you, and really get to the heart of that emotion, because if it triggers you, then there's something inside you that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
But we have to first identify those triggers, and that's what 4 and 5 are, particularly 4. So,
but no matter how many you work through, there will always be something. And one of the things I notice about triggers personally is that you can address it today, but 2 months from now, you might find that same trigger coming up. Right? And you're like, I thought I dealt with this. Because this has happened to me as I unfold through my spiritual journey. The same triggers that impacted me, let's say 10 years ago, are still kind of there, percolating. I haven't fully processed them. And it can be kind of frustrating because you think, wow, I thought I was done with this, right? Because we all want to be done. We're like, I've evolved. Now what's next? It's the brand new me. This is a New Year's resolution, right? It's like, I'm done. It's the new me. I found the new me, and it lasts for 30 days, if that much.
Because there's an interesting concept. I think family can be the biggest trigger, right?
I agree.
And I say that as my daughter is sitting right here. The family can be the biggest trigger, right? If she's sitting right here, she could probably relate to that. But the reason why I say that is, what's interesting is that I found that when I go home now, that's when I'm triggered the most, because if you think about this, when you leave home, see, I went into the military. Well, I left college, went into the military, went off, and never really went back home again. I've always lived somewhere else. But when you leave your home, really, your relationship with your parents goes back to the way it was when you lived at home. They remember you the way that you were when you were at home. Now, when you're 30 years old, 40 years old, in your 50s, where I'm at right now, there's been a lot of development on your end since you left home, right?
Yes.
But what do they remember? You were 19, 20 years old, however old you were when you left home, and you're still that kid that was living there. But you're like, no, I'm a grown man that's had a career and been in charge of things and done all these other things and really developed. That's not what they see, because they never saw that. And so when you go home and they're treating you like you were that 18, 19-year-old when you're living at home, that's triggering. That's very triggering, at least for me. But the difference with us, though, is people, when I say us, people like in recovery and people that do the work that you do, we become aware of it. Like, so when I go home and I visit, my family, I'm very aware that that's happening. And I mentally try to prepare for that. But so a lot of people, that's why you and I have talked about this before, everyone really needs to be in some sort of a program of recovery to have those concepts. Right?
And it's interesting you bring this up, because just recently I noticed I was home with my mom, who's recently turned 80, and she said to me, she was watching something on TV where this girl was meditating in the Himalayas for, I think 6 hours straight, and so they were capturing her journey. And my mom was like, watch this, she's able to sit and meditate for 6 hours, and I was like, wait, I've done that like so many times in the trips I've taken and the retreats I've done in the Himalaya, in the same places they were showing. Meanwhile, she has no recollection of, totally has no concept that I've done that, right? So, and then yet she's watching someone on TV doing the same thing. So I was just like, part of me was that little girl inside wanted to say, you never appreciate anything I've done, but you notice it on TV with some random person that we don't even know.
They've done it once. I've done it every day.
Yeah, right? And I'm like, God, I've been doing that for like years now, for like 5-6 years. So... yeah, so it does trigger you, right? But then I caught myself and I was like, well, from her perspective, she doesn't really know, because it's not like she was with me when I was doing all this. So I've learned to back off a little bit and see the situation from the other person's perspective. Because I still, no matter how much meditation I do, I still get triggered by certain situations. And instead of being like, I can't believe I lost my cool on this. I don't lose my cool. I just sit and observe it. And I think, okay, the number one thing that we learn on the spiritual path is that whenever we're triggered, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, what am I here to learn? How do I grow from this experience?
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, always. That's the first thing you ask is, how do I grow from this experience? Now, sometimes if you're really triggered, it might take you a little while to get there, but you really want to go back and examine, okay, how can I grow from this experience? Because only then can you get better, little by little by little. It is, for me, been that journey where it's like small baby steps of growth.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is important because I do believe that in life, you are being prepared. Whatever you go through, you're being prepared for something else. You're being prepared for what's coming. And many of you know we've talked about this on this program that, I'm running for a political office right now. And I can tell you that this whole recovery journey has prepared me for that, because if you've never run for a political office, or if you've never been in the public light, it's a daily beatdown. Almost nothing I do, literally, not almost, everything I do is criticized. There's nothing that comes out of my mouth that is not criticized by somebody, and it's online. I'm barraged with texts and Facebook. You're just attacked relentlessly, and that's just business. That's in the political world. That's just business. If I was not practicing the things that we're talking about from a recovery standpoint, there's no way I could function. There's no way, because you have to. I do believe I was prepared for the beating that was to come in this business, and so I really like what you were just saying. There is, whatever you're going through, whatever trial you're going through, ask yourself, why am I going through this, and what can I learn from it?
And with that, thank you so much for being here, Mike. It's always a pleasure to have you here on Mindful Nation Radio. You're listening to Mindful Nation Radio. I'm your host, Aparna. And we always try and bring you these delightful topics and delightful guests. Mike, it is such a blessing that we have you to be with us live. Continue to tune into the show Tuesdays and Fridays, 10 o'clock, half an hour. Enjoy your journey today. And with that, we are going to sign off on Mindful Nation Radio. You're listening to WERA.
So that was my interview with Aparna Sain, and I want to thank her for doing that interview of me, and I'm sure that was some great information for you or a loved one or someone you know that needs to be in recovery, or they're just working on their own spiritual journey. And again, that was an interview that we did last week on WERA 96.7 FM here in Arlington, Virginia. And so, folks, with that, again, my name is Mike Van Meter. Recovery is possible. Check this out, the radio show that is on WERA, or, pass this podcast on to anyone that needs it, because recovery is possible, and we are looking forward to just sharing all of this information with everyone out there that needs it, because, man, goodness, we are having a real addiction issue in this nation, particularly with fentanyl, which is just getting so out of control. And so with that, folks, this episode of Recovery is Possible is brought to you by Retreat Behavioral Health, where there are endless possibilities for recovery. Retreat provides quality care at their leading mental health and substance use treatment centers, which are designed to offer patients truly personalized and comprehensive programs that are tailored to their needs. Retreat substance use and mental health treatment centers in Palm Beach County, Florida, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and New Haven, Connecticut do everything in their power to ensure that patients receive the highest quality treatment in a safe and comfortable setting. So reach out today at retreatbehavioralhealth.com or call us at 855-802-6600 for more information. And folks, I will see you next time here on Recovery is Possible, because it is. Put in the work. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.